What is going on, Fantasy Fam? Welcome to the Week 9 edition of Plugged In. I am your host / guest, JM to Win, here with the great Scott Barrett. Scott, my man, how are you doing? You look a little melancholy today. Is that just catching you at the wrong hour of the day, or are you feeling melancholy?
I don't know. I think I'm feeling okay. I'm excited to do this show. Could just be like the gray shirt, influencing vibes or something. I don't know.
That's what it is. How was your weekend this last weekend?
It was good. It was enjoyable. Didn't really smash. I had 80% of my money tied up in Tua doubles.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and with Pollard, of course, gotta squeeze Pollard on there. So that's four guys with over 33 fantasy points, and those lineups barely cashed. Like, this is a tricky week. I had 32% Kamara in the morning, and then I don't know what happened, but it ended up being 0%. Like, he wasn't even someone I was trying to kick out. I know I was trying to get more Ayuk in and do a few other things like that, but I ended up going from like 30% to like 0%. Just sloppy play by me in the morning, I think. Looked at AJ Brown. I had a lineup where I kept going back and forth between AJ Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. I think I just deleted that lineup in the morning. But yeah, so it wasn't a great week for me, despite nailing the right QB stack. How did it go for you? And any process thoughts on that?
Yeah, so process thoughts is where I'm going to be most valuable this week. I actually took last week almost entirely off of DFS, which I really loved the week, but I also, you and I have talked about this before, you kind of need like one bye week per season, and every once in a while 2 bye weeks per season when you're doing, like, for us, football season starts like early July, and it's like we've been grinding for 2 months before NFL kicks off, and then week 1 you're kind of like, oh my gosh, the season's just starting, and so I really liked this last week, and I kind of knew throughout the week that I was going to go super light. I actually thought that I'd play somewhat heavily on FanDuel and maybe on Yahoo, and ended up not doing that like at all. I put in like $65 on FanDuel. I had a bunch of stuff in on props and parlays, but I always wait until the end of Friday to make the final decision of like, okay, I'm not playing this week because all of my content ends on Friday. And so I want to make sure that in my mind, I'm still playing until that content production ends. So I was still building. I think I built 60 practice rosters last week on DraftKings, and basically just to have it in my mind, like, hey, I might be playing this week. And so what I had this last week, though, it was kind of interesting because I came out of Sunday and it was like, yeah, I would have had a decent week, but probably wouldn't have won much money, right? I had most of my practice builds had Kamara, Pollard, Henry, Christian McCaffrey. Like, those were 4 running backs that most of my practice rosters had at least 2 of them, and a lot of my practice rosters had 3. Most of my rosters had Tyreek Hill. But in order to fit in Tyreek Hill and those high-priced running backs, what I was doing was using Sam Ehlinger, using guys like Van Jefferson, Chris Moore, different guys like that. And then I was bringing back all of my Tyreek Hill rosters with Amon-Ra St. Brown. My thinking was that as long as it wasn't a Tua double stack week, which it ended up being, as long as it wasn't a Tua double stack week, Tyreek Hill could get there, Amon-Ra St. Brown could get there, and Ehlinger's 13 to 20 points would be more valuable than Tua's 18 to 22 to 25, whatever points he got, just because of the ability to fit in those extra elite pieces, which this last week I kind of felt like we would need, and we did in fact need the extra elite pieces. And so, yeah, it was an interesting week where I came out of, a lot of times those weeks off, you come out feeling really confident because you're like, oh, cool, I identified all the sharp plays. And that was kind of how I came out of the weekend feeling like, oh, I was on Henry, I was on Christian McCaffrey at low ownership, I was on, in which all of these were sharp plays, obviously, right? I was on Tony Pollard, I was on Kamara, I was on Tyreek Hill, but then you look at the week and like so many guys hit that I'm like, I didn't have Hill and Waddle. I brought it back with Amon-Ra St. Brown, which he didn't hit. And that's a weird situation, right? Where you can have 2 wide receivers from one team hit in a competitive game and nobody really hits from the other side. Jamal Williams, I guess, was the guy who hit from the other side. But if you were playing Jamal Williams with Tyreek and Waddle outside of just like playing 150 max and mixing and matching it, a bunch of different things. Like, I don't know what the thought process is there to end up with Jamal Williams on like a, if you're on 3 max or 5 max or something like that, like a hand build type approach. So yeah, it was an interesting week where I came out of it like, okay, confident that I got a bunch of things right. Confident that I would have put together a really good roster, but also I wouldn't have, like, I didn't lose a bunch of money that I might have won. I probably would have min cashed or finished right on the cut line. So yeah, it was just one of those weeks. What did you have on those Tua, Tyreek, Waddle rosters? Did you have anything from the Lions side, or did you just scrap the Lions side?
Yeah, of course I played Amon-Ra St. Brown. I thought it made all the sense in the world. He wasn't concussed.
Yeah. So he just got like an extra week of rest, basically.
Right. So I'm like, okay, so he tanked all my lineups last week to make me a ton of money this week. I didn't, I guess, put enough consideration into the fact that without DJ Chark, he's spending less time in the slot. So our guy, Khalif Raymond, is getting more work there.
Our guy, Khalif Raymond, who's hit like every week since we played him, basically.
Exactly. Tom Kennedy went off that week. Jesus.
And you came out of that week and you're like, well, I guess Tom Kennedy might have been the play. And I was like, I don't know about that, man. Like, Khalif Raymond
made zero sense. And he also had 2 key drops. But yeah, so he tanked that. I also played Kenneth Walker, Van Jefferson, who was a 0.
I thought that was such a sharp play too, Van Jefferson.
Yeah,
I mean, and he played 55% of the snaps, I think, something like that. Like, he was out there. 49ers defense was a tough one because you need the time for those Van Jefferson routes to develop. Like, I didn't feel great about him, but I felt like I didn't think I was getting an 18-pointer from him, but I knew that was in his range. And it was like, well, if he misses, he gets 6-7 points at 3K and like under 3% ownership. But turned out that he was uninvolved in that game.
He also had the negative game script he needed for deep shots.
Yep.
Cooper Kupp got hurt. And yeah, so I actually almost sat out this week as well. I might do that this week. I think you're right. You just kind of need a buy every now and then. But I just really liked my process. It was, again, like so much of my money tied up in 2 doubles. And it's like I felt good about the double because they ranked top 3 in yards per route run, both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And Waddle, when healthy, has been just such a monster. And Tyreek, I think, he's right there with a healthy Cooper Kupp this season in this offense. He has more yards per game than Jerry Rice has ever had in his entire career. And then I had a ton of Malik Willis and Sam Ehlinger, and those lineups were all super dead. But I just really like the process there. Maybe both teams go way too conservative, which I think we did end up seeing. But just the value that allowed you to pay up for some key pieces. And I kind of was just bullish. Like Malik Willis, I think he had similar top 3 upside to any QB cheaper than Kyler Murray. It just, I mean, Derrick Henry had 40 carries and 250 rushing yards or whatever. And then for my Millie Maker lineups, I like this too. I went with Rams, San Fran doubles, and I just thought, all right, no one's gonna play Matthew Stafford, and like Cooper Kupp's gonna go low owned, and you could pair him up with Van Jefferson where it's affordable, and then Deebo Samuel's out, and Kittle averages 8 fantasy points per game more when Deebo's out. Ayuk averages 6 more, and I like that. But of course, it was a Christian McCaffrey week, as I should have known. I just didn't get there. But yeah, I also thought the 49ers defense has looked somewhat fraudulent in recent weeks. But yeah, so I still today feel good about my process. Should have stuck with the Alvin Kamara. Should have stuck with, or should have given more thought towards AJ Brown breaking the slate. Like, he's just been so due for a game like that for a while now, and it was a good matchup.
Yeah, I had the like alternate yards bet down on AJ Brown. They had DraftKings had alternate yards at like plus 600 for 125 plus yards. I was like, throw $50 down on that because like more than once every 6 games, he's going to top 125 yards. It's just his line is lower because he's so inconsistent. But when he hits big. I didn't have AJ Brown on my like DFS radar just because it's so unprojectable. And on a week like this where I felt, well, I'll tell you how I was approaching the week. And this is why I think your approach is super sharp, is I was approaching the week saying, so we all remember the Miami-Baltimore week, right? Where that game went off and no other game went off. Well, this week we had 11 games on the slate, and 8 of those games had an over-under of 44.5 or below. And so you really only have 3 games that Vegas is saying have a shot at shooting out. And so if it's not unreasonable to think that only one of those shoots out, right? So then if one of those shoots out and the others don't, you end up with the only game that you had to have. Like it's set up perfectly for a week where you could end up with the only game you had to have. And what's the likeliest game to be that game was Miami and Detroit. And so I think that there was a second unique factor in that there were so many attractive running backs kind of littered across things. And when there's that many options, it's hard. Like I was on Kenneth Walker all week. And then as I got deeper into like Saturday, it was like, yeah, but Kenneth Walker catches like 1 or 2 passes per game, or this role yields 1 or 2 receptions per game. And we've got guys like Kamara who's catching 7 passes per game at $600 more on DraftKings. We've got Christian McCaffrey with basically like an extra week of practice when Debo out, where I kind of felt like they were just going to focus on him. We got Derrick Henry going against Houston, where we know he's going to get 30 plus touches, and Kenneth Walker's probably capped at 20, 21, 22. And so, yeah, it was an interesting, and then Pollard, when really Pollard ended up like bailing everybody out who played him. He had 14 carries and 1 catch, managed to put up 3 touchdowns on that. But I would have had Pollard on my roster as well. And then I would have just been like, well, that's just that's a sick suck out that you end up getting the 3 touchdowns on only 15 touches. But yeah, it was an interesting weekend that you had to like, I felt like the way to play it was pick one game, bet on that game blowing up. I even had some like overstacks in my practice builds of New Orleans and Las Vegas, of Minnesota, Arizona, of Detroit and Miami. But I was really set on like, hey, and I can play Ellinger because I mean, they ran him. He had 0 rush attempts in the first half, which is absurd. That's ridiculous. And on top of that, John, like I was back and forth with Zandamir on like Friday, Saturday about, I was telling him that we should have Jonathan Taylor over 17.5 carries is one of our official prop bets in our prop subscription. And he was like, well, he's coming back from injury. And there's like, we have a lot of question marks on how this offense is going to be run. And I said, look, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't get over 17.5 carries, Sam Ehlinger is like the smash DFS play of the season. Right. And turns out like Taylor ends up re-aggravating the ankle and then they still don't run Ehlinger. But anyhow, I was basically like locked into this idea of, look, you can pay $4K for this guy who's going to get you. And my thought process was sound. He got like 9-10 points. And I was saying he can get 10 to 13 points. It doesn't kill you, but most scenarios he's going to get you 15 to 20. And he's so cheap. And it was like, then you can get the game you need plus as many of these running backs as you need. And that was what I felt like the week shaped up as, was get the running backs, get the game right, and you win all the money. And so you basically, that was what you attempted to do, was like get the games right, get the running backs right. And you just didn't get the running backs right on the ones where you got the game right.
Yeah.
And that's the podcast. Thanks for hanging out this week. Okay. So yeah, we had some weird, like a lot of weird usage things. We talked about Pollard. Who is it? Malik Davis is the practice squad backup there. He got more carries than anyone would have expected. I was kind of concerned about that, but it was like, well, Pollard at 6,100, he's so explosive. You just got to put him in. DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins has topped 30 points before this last week, and he topped 30 points once in 27 games with Kyler. And then he comes out, and I used that stat a bunch last week, and he comes out and drops like 36, 37 points. I had a lot of Devontae Adams early in the week because I was like, man, or like midweek, I was like, nobody's going to be on him. And then like Abby and I had COVID in, I don't know, summer. And it was like 3 weeks before my body felt normal again, right? And I was thinking about how often we treat these athletes like machines. We're like, oh, this guy had bad flu. Well, let's just expect him to come out and like be his normal self. Michael Jordan did it once, right? Like this guy's going to come out and have a big game. And I was like, man, your body is just wrecked after that. Like you have so little energy. So I kind of got off Devontae Adams. I think that this kind of gives us an opportunity this next week to be like, everybody just kind of thinks Devontae Adams is dead in this offense, but realistically, he missed multiple practices with what they were calling bad flu. And so, yeah, but that was weird. He had like -1 rushing yard and like one catch, 2 catches, something like that. Underdog had him at 5 second half catches. And I was like, hit the under on that. Like this dude clearly is not right today. But yeah, it was kind of a weird week with like in some of those things. And then Jalen Hurts had 2 rush attempts. He hadn't been below 9 rush attempts at any point. He's playing Houston this next week. So we got to think about that of like, are they going to rush him less if he's way up in a game like this? Kenny Pickett continued to turn the ball over. Malik Willis wasn't allowed to do anything. Just some random thoughts from this last week. And you got any thoughts on any of those guys or anything else from this last weekend?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through my write-up from last week. Top running backs: Tony Pollard, Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, yikes, Alvin Kamara. Top wide receivers: Amon-Ra St. Brown was 1, Tyreek Hill 2, Chris Olave 3, DJ Moore 4, runner-up Jacoby Myers at the same price, Jalen Waddle 5, Ayuk 6, Hopkins 7, Wandale 8. Yeah, so Kenneth Walker.
Wandale, that was weird. That was weird usage.
I mean, I kind of liked him early on in the week, and then everyone else liked him, and I'm like a natural contrarian, where, you know, I was like so high on him as a prospect, so high on him as like a redraft and dynasty ad. But then he was being talked up as chalk, and it's just like, I don't know about his upside. But yeah, just the lack of target volume is what was weird. Slayton, by the way, is like way better than he gets credit for, and like
way better.
Giants just hate him for some reason, but he does well when he's on the field. Walker to me is sort of like, you know, mini Nick Chubb, or like that's how I was imagining him. Seattle's RB1 averages 18.5 fantasy points per game over the last 12 games, 24.2 in victories. He was seeing better usage than Rashad Penny. He leads the league by a landslide in basically the Nick Chubb stat, like my favorite stat for measuring elusiveness or breakaway ability, irrespective of offensive line play. And so the Giants haven't given up a ton to running backs on the ground, but they are extremely inefficient. They ranked worst by non-QB yards before contact per allowed. And so I just got so excited about this matchup for this guy I like. And yeah, it looks like they really just sold out to stop him, which we did see them do against Derrick Henry, and they looked good doing it. So that was just like a small little thing I missed. Josh Jacobs, I mean, Amir Abdullah got surprisingly more run than I expected, but still I think it's just, I mean, I didn't expect them getting blown out to that degree. Alvin Kamara, I've been saying, is like so I think this is interesting, is like 4 years ago, I had a stat, or I called running backs who were getting 12 or more carries per game, but also wide receiver 1 target volume. I was calling them like Uber backs. And like, I used that phrase for like 4 months, and then I just never used it again. But like, we're seeing that. So I talk about in weighted opportunity that targets for a running back are 2.8 times as valuable as a carry in PPR leagues. And we're really seeing that this year with Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey. It's basically like DJ Moore sort of wide receiver 1 target volume, or maybe not last week, he had a higher ADOT, but like low ADOT, like 10 targets, 60 plus receiving yards. And then they're also getting all this work near the end zone, all of these carries. And they're just such an absolute cheat code. He's been due for a touchdown regression for a while. And yeah, like those running backs, those 3 running backs are going to be so hard to fade because they're the most consistent. They're the most immune to great game script. They have the highest ceiling, the highest floor, the highest median projection. And so it's funny, like 3 weeks ago, we were like, yeah, it's you team jam him in, Adam Levitan. You really just want to pay for those highest end power law running backs, but we're not seeing that this year. Maybe it's Josh Jacobs, maybe it's Saquon Barkley, but yeah, now like glaringly to me, there's three, running backs who you have to spend a great deal of research on every single week, and the
Yeah,
research is always going to point you towards playing them.
yeah, and I think too that we need to, like NFL teams, every coach will say in September and October, it's like, well, obviously they'll say we haven't won anything yet, but they'll also say like if you're not playing your best football in November and December, like you don't have a shot, right? You have to be the team that keeps getting better. And I look at DFS the same way. You have to be constantly adjust, like updating your thoughts on situations. So early in the season, Kamara wasn't as central to this offense as he is right now, but with the switch to Andy Dalton and with the loss of Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas, Kamara is that guy. And I think that what we've also seen, we've talked about this a lot this year and last year, really, but it's the changing nature of the running back position in the NFL. So where teams, nobody used to use running backs this way. And then the Steelers started using Le'Veon Bell this way, and the Cardinals were like, oh, hey, we've got David Johnson. He was a wide receiver in college. We can use him this way. And all these running backs started getting drafted and developed to be this guy. And then we had all these workhorse running backs, these 3-down running backs. And then these guys got big contracts, started getting hurt, and teams started being like, oh, let's split the backfield. We don't need to invest all this money in running backs. And so now we're in this state where people still pay up for the Dalvin Cooks, right? Because Dalvin Cook can hit 30 points. He can hit 26, 28 points, but they're paying up for him the way that they used to pay up for these other guys. And it's like Dalvin Cook has, I think, 2 games, maybe it's 3 games in his career over like 32 DraftKings points. And that was when his role was bigger. And so there's really no need to be paying up for these guys who usually hit like 16, 18 points and can occasionally hit 30. The point of these pay up guys is that we started getting, when Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson got up over 8K, that was like the first time we'd seen a running back over 8K since Adrian Peterson, and Adrian Peterson was always kind of dumb to pay up for because he didn't catch passes. And then all of a sudden Christian McCaffrey came along. We got used to seeing like 9K plus at running back, 8K plus at running back. And we kind of forgot that like we shouldn't just automatically pay that price tag for running backs. And so these guys, the Alvin Kamara's, the Christian McCaffrey's, the Austin Eckler's, these guys who are super involved in the pass game, we need to remember that that's the reason why we started getting this higher running back pricing tier. And so unless it's like Derrick Henry in a smash spot, like against Houston, which you look through Derrick Henry's game logs, right? Almost all of his smashes have come against like Houston and Jacksonville, right? It's always games where you know that Tennessee is going to dominate and where the run defense can't stop him. And so when we have, Jacksonville had all these smaller linebackers back then, and they would just smash Jacksonville every year. And the same thing with Houston. Currently, like Houston can't stop Derrick Henry. But outside of those situations, I'm not the kind of guy who's like, hey, and maybe Derrick Henry smashes this week. Maybe Derrick Henry smashes in this mediocre matchup or tough matchup. Like I want to be paying up for these guys. I think that Josh Jacobs was an interesting one because he had 5 catches in 3 straight games, and his targets were like, I think like around 5 to 6 in most of these games. But really his big value was coming from all these touchdowns. And so it was like his price was getting steamed up from the touchdowns. And we know that touchdown regression is going to hit eventually. So I had a lot of Josh Jacobs on my practice builds, but kind of started moving away from him deeper into the week. And I think that like Kenneth Walker too, I think Kenneth Walker was a super sharp play, but given what the week gave us, like on a different week, I would have liked Miles Sanders. On a different week, I would have had a lot more Raheem Mostert. On a different week, I would have been more into Kenneth Walker, but it was kind of like with Kamara only 600 more than Kenneth Walker, and with Christian McCaffrey going kind of unowned, and with Derrick Henry playing the Texans, it was like it felt like you had to match the scores that these guys could get, which kind of made it like, I guess I was going to say it made it a don't overthink it spot to me, but Kenneth Walker was popular as well, and he was a super sharp play as well. But it just became a thing of like, if you don't get the 30-point score, somebody else is getting it this week. And so that was it's one of the reasons why like I talk a lot about every week is unique and different. You have to think about what's unique about this particular week. I think that was a very unique element of last week, was there were a lot of viable running backs, like a lot. And yet there was only a few that it was like these guys can put up a score that would be really difficult to catch up to. Again, turns out Pollard was able to do it on 15 touches. It's crazy that they won't give him the ball more. I know that's a Jerry Jones thing, not a Mike McCarthy or Kellen Moore thing, but you got this $15 million Ezekiel Elliott's got to get his touches. But yeah, and then I'm curious your thoughts on Malik Willis as far as why, I guess. And I know that like the macro why is like he can run the ball, he's got this upside. But this last week I just kind of saw them be like, I feel like he's really raw, and I saw them being like, hey, we'll just run the ball all game. Do you have any like retrospective thoughts on that where you're like, yeah, I would do things differently? Or do you look back and you're like, no, I would do that the same way? And I'm curious on that too, just because like, you know more about the individual players and situations. So like, I'd love to learn whether you're looking back at that and like, yeah, no, that was a mistake, or if you're looking back at that and you're like, no, I would do that again.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear your thoughts, because I think I would do that again. But you're not wrong to say he's extremely raw. He fell to round 3 for a reason. You know, a ton of teams who needed quarterbacks passed on him. I mean, 10 pass attempts, 5 rushes for 12 yards. I mean, that just seems like such an outlierish, volume performance. But then again, it was Derrick Henry versus the top run funnel, worst run defense in football. And even with Tannehill, like the Titans kind of would have went this route anyway. Really just freakish upside with his mobility, like probably closer to Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson than a Jalen Hurts in terms of rushing potential. This preseason, in his debut, he had like 70 rushing yards in like one full quarter of work. And then they yanked him from the game. And the reasoning for yanking him, they said, like, listen, we know he can run. We don't want him to run. We want him to learn how to be a better passer. So that's why we pulled him. He was running too much. And in this game, it just seemed like they tried to hide him as much as possible due to probably those passing question marks. But just with a player like this, I mean, it seemed to me like Taysom Hill, like we know Taysom Hill is not very good as a quarterback, but because of his freakish mobility, he's finishing top 5 every week he starts. And so I saw that in the range of outcomes, but yeah, I probably should have, recognized that the most likely outcome was they would hide him as much as possible. And Derrick Henry would have 90% of the team's yards from scrimmage or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the macro thought is sharp. I couldn't bring myself to be interested in him just because it was like, I just can't see them calling a game that would unleash him, in a spot where they're going to control the game. But I mean, we're also looking at one sample, like a 1 week sample size, right? And I think that that's important to recognize, is that week could very easily have played out differently. He ends up with a bunch of points. And we've also seen like look at Browns and Bengals, right? Like you bet on everything based on the perceived game flow that you're going to see, but then the game flow ends up being very different than that game flow. And I think that, we could look at Tennessee and Houston and be like, well, Tennessee is going to control this game. It's going to play out this way. But if we played out that game 100 times, there's going to be times when Houston ends up randomly having a lead. Malik Willis ends up turning the ball over early. Houston, gets a touchdown on their first drive and then gets another touchdown off a turnover. And all of a sudden it's 14-0. And Tennessee's got to call a more aggressive game. And now Malik Willis is unleashed for this big game. So I certainly think that it was in the range of outcomes for him to have a big game. Just not where I was going this last week based on kind of how I saw the slate shaping up. I'll tell you who is super interesting to me right now is Justin Fields. I don't know how much attention you've paid to him lately, but in the same way of like, I always want to watch for these guys who we have a perception of them as being one thing, and then they start turning into something different. Whereas like, you remember 2018, we were able to do that with Josh Allen, where it was like, oh, he was really bad before he got injured. He came back with like 6 games left, and all of a sudden he's a different player. And he was still like super raw Josh Allen, but it was like, oh, you can just bet on this team every week and find some upside. I wouldn't say like the Josh Allen rookie year, it was Brian Dable was calling the shots, and they had a lot of downfield passing involved in that offense, which there's less of that with Justin Fields. But the designed rushing attack of Luke Getsy, and I feel like Luke Getsy is getting like a really bad rap. Like he's kind of calling an offense with his hands tied. We know that Chicago this year was essentially, they were like, let's not build around Justin Fields this year and let's give him like another year of development with a bad offensive line and no weapons. And now they've gotten rid of Robert Quinn, gotten rid of Roquan Smith. Like they're basically just saying, hey, let's build for the future. And Justin Fields will have to learn and develop this year with what he has around him. And I think next year they'll start adding some pieces for him. But I think Getsy's done a phenomenal job, and it's way harder to scheme run looks that open up space than it is to scheme pass looks that open up space. And that's what he's having to do here. But Justin Fields, like his decision-making has looked a lot better. His short area accuracy is still an issue, but downfield throws look good, and they're letting him run the ball. I really like what I'm seeing from Justin Fields. He's playing the Dolphins this next week, which I think is a super interesting spot, especially if the Dolphins go sort of man heavy in their coverage schemes. And then speaking of man heavy, Sam Ehlinger is playing the Patriots this week, who got absolutely torched by Lamar Jackson, absolutely torched by Justin Fields on the ground, because the Patriots under Steve Belichick refused to do anything but play heavy man coverage, including against rushing quarterbacks. And as we know, man coverage, the secondary is not looking at the quarterback. Their backs are often turned to the quarterback. Makes it a lot easier for rushing quarterbacks. I feel like maybe Frank Reich will open up the rushing attack for Sam Ehlinger a little bit more. Not to get toward week 9 too early, but just a couple spots that are interesting to me. And yeah, that just built off the Justin Fields thing. You have any thoughts on Justin Fields, where he's at in his development, what that means for us as DFS players, as season-long players at this point?
Yeah, so all offseason I was saying Justin Fields is the single best QB value in drafts. He had like a mid to low end QB2 ADP. So, I saw minimal risk and I saw a lot of upside due to his mobility. Sure, it's the worst offensive line in football, but that matters a lot less for hypermobile quarterbacks. Worst receiving core in football, but matters a lot less for hypermobile quarterbacks. So after about 4 weeks, all of our subscribers were like, hey, what's going on with Justin Fields? And I'm just like, yeah, well, he looks terrible and he's not running enough. So that just looks like a bad pick by me. And then over the most recent 4-week stretch, he ranks as the overall QB2 or the QB6 by fantasy points per game. He's finished 13th, 8th, 5th, and 5th in fantasy points. He's running a whole lot more. Week 9, Miami ranks 8th worst against quarterbacks. Week 10, Detroit ranks 3rd worst.
Ooh, Detroit,
week 11,
nice.
Week 11, Atlanta ranks 4th worst. And so now he's kind of looking like who I hoped he would be. He said after that mini bye, he spent more time breaking down Lamar Jackson's tape and how Greg Roman uses Lamar Jackson, and he wanted to copy that, which was a whole reason why I liked it. It's like Darnell Mooney is their Hollywood Brown, Kmet is their Mark Andrews. In the preseason, he was, they schemed up a lot of easy first reads, which is like what I thought he needed. And so everything is pointing toward, it's like Elijah Moore, where last year I was suicidal through the first 6 weeks, and then he was the wide receiver 3 over the next 5 weeks. And you get that in fantasy football, where sometimes it feels like there's 3 seasons within a season. You just break it up into thirds, and players can look totally different. We also need to talk about some of the trades that are being made today. The Bears, I think, overpaid, giving up their round 2 pick. That's an early round 2 pick for Chase Claypool, but like that certainly has to help Justin Fields.
I am just tuning into news. I was not aware of that. That's a big one. I love that. No, that's an overpay. That's an overpay for sure. But Chase Claypool, man, especially so I think that one of the things that Chicago sees, and I think that this is something that Fields will. I love that we're talking about Justin Fields right now, because 3 weeks ago I was, Josh Morano, who reads the NFL Edge audio for us, he had texted me and he was like, why does everybody talk about Fields as this high upside guy? He's like, I just see a guy who doesn't know what he's doing and who makes a lot of mistakes. And I was saying to him, and I said this on one of our podcasts. I was like, it's great to like adjust our perception of a player before the field does. And so if everybody's like, oh, Justin Fields has all this upside, and we can adjust and be like, yeah, but he doesn't look good, it's not coming together for him, then that helps us. And then after he and I had that conversation, it was like when things started coming together for Fields over the next few weeks. And I thought this was interesting. Trent Dilfer, who runs I forget the name of his quarterback camp, but he runs a quarterback camp that like every young quarterback has come through. And Dilfer has said that Fields was one of his 3 favorite quarterbacks that's ever come through the camp. And his like the other guy who helps him run the camp said Fields was his number 1 quarterback that ever came through. And he would stake his career on the fact that Fields would be successful. And so I think that one of the things that the Bears realize is that Fields, like mechanically, he is going to be off on short area throws. He has an elongated release. It takes too long to get the ball out, which isn't great for short area throws. And that just messes with short area accuracy. So I'm sure over the next couple of years, a couple more off seasons to work on things, he's going to get better and better at that. But what he is good at right now is running the ball and throwing the ball downfield. And so you bring in Claypool to combine with Mooney, and that gives you that extra downfield option. I like that a lot. And yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned them studying the Ravens, studying Greg Roman, who's, a savant at designing run schemes. And like I said, it's just so much harder to design run schemes that are unique and that open up space because you're in these clumped up areas. And Greg Roman does it better than anyone. And last week there was, that was kind of a narrative around Chicago was like, hey, they've kind of borrowed some concepts, some plays from the Ravens. We're starting to see that on the team. And I think we'll see that more and more. And so, yeah, when we get to this point in the season, we talk about being like an NFL team as a DFS player, being like an NFL team and improving throughout the season. This is a place where I think we can improve is recognizing, hey, this Bears offense is more exciting than the field is going to realize. We're going to get a few weeks of low ownership on this Bears offense before people really come around. You mentioned Dolphins this next week and then Lions week 11. Is that a bye week in between those?
No, Atlanta.
Okay. Do they have a bye week coming? It was, you said Miami, then Detroit.
Miami week 9, Detroit week 10, Atlanta week 11.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Very interesting set of games here for this Bears offense. I think people are still going to be a little bit scared to pull the trigger on. We've got the split backfield now with Montgomery and Herbert. It really should just be Herbert getting 65% of the touches. But, if you're kind of running a Ravens type offense, you're going to mix and match those running backs anyway. And the running backs are rarely going to be the guys that you're going to want to go to, but that opens things up for Justin Fields. So, I'm getting excited. I already looked ahead to this next week. He's 5,300 against the Dolphins. So that's definitely one. I mean, that was Monday night. I was looking at that. So there's plenty still to uncover, but that's one that I'm definitely interested in this week. Have there been any other trades that have come? Oh God, Irv Smith is expected to miss 8 to 10 weeks. Have there been any other trades that have come up? Oh God, the Vikings got TJ Hawkinson. Wow, I'm catching up on everything. Let's talk about this. What else have you seen?
The Dolphins traded Chase Edmonds for Bradley Chubb. There are a few more pieces added in, but Miami gets a first-round pick. The 49ers.
What did the Broncos need Chase Edmonds for?
I have no idea. A first, a fourth, and Chase Edmonds randomly for Bradley Chubb in a fifth.
They were like, we'll only pull the trigger on this if we can get Chase Edmonds here.
Well, that was the funniest thing about the the Russell Wilson trade is like, it was all these pieces. It was Noah Fant, 2 round 1s, 2 round 2s, Drew Lock, and then the Broncos were getting Russell Wilson plus like a round 5 and giving back a round 6. Like the whole trade hinged on like a round 6 to round 5 move up, and it seems so bizarre.
I started following, this has nothing to do with anything, but I started following Formula One this year because William is really into cars and we started watching clips, and then that led to me getting into the sport. But anyhow, I've become a huge Lewis Hamilton fan, who's the greatest Formula One driver. And he's part of the ownership group that bought the Broncos. And everything that has happened since that ownership group bought the Broncos, I'm like, man, these guys have to be kicking themselves. Like, what did we buy into? This franchise is a mess right now. That's very interesting. What are your thoughts on Hawkinson with this Vikings offense moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know. One of my go-to film experts, who's also a Lions fan, has been telling me for months he thinks TJ Hawkinson is just like not very good, or at least super overrated. And I guess based on the details of this trade, um, they would have had him under contract for all of next year too. That has to be correct. Um, and so if that's correct, I don't know how much upside there is in this offense. I do think clearly Adam Thielen's just not really the same guy. He's seeing good volume, but I
Great
just don't
volume.
think, yeah, I don't think he has much 100-yard upside. So I think, and that's been the case for a while. So it's really just, living and dying on touchdowns. And now you add TJ Hawkinson to the mix, who's, maybe he's an overrated route runner, but he can score touchdowns just due to his size.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely doesn't change anything negatively for Justin Jefferson, and might change things positively a little bit. It's hard, man. If you're an NFL team, it's hard to draft and develop tight ends. Not that we can throw Kyle Pitts into that mix yet, especially with the way that they're running that offense. But we see so many. I mean, T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant, these guys were pretty hyped when they came in. These first round picks, these high second round picks at tight end, it's tough for these guys to develop ascending into that mid tier of tight ends who were less heralded than these other guys. But yeah, man, that's interesting. I love that the NFL trade deadline has gotten more exciting than it used to be. Credit the Rams and some other teams who kind of started making bold moves, and then teams see it pay off. I think the thinking used to be, well, it's just hard to integrate these players, but realistically, like the Christian McCaffreys, they're going to come in, they're going to get the playbook down, within a couple of weeks for the most part. They're going to be able to go out there and contribute. So, yeah. Any other thoughts from the trades, from current teams from this last week?
The Rams offered the Panthers 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns, and the Panthers turned that down. But that just seems so crazy to me. They wouldn't have a first-round pick until 2026, and that's just full-on NBA, where Les Snead is basically yeah, I'll be fired by then if we don't get another Super Bowl, so it's not my problem. And I don't know, that just seems the Rams are going to be a terrible team in 4 years. They're going to be so
realistically
bad,
though.
One of those will be a top 5 pick.
They're excellent at getting guys in the third, fourth round who can legitimately contribute. When they got Cooper Kupp, they were I read about them celebrating when he ran his 40 time because it was so slow that they were like, man, we can get him in the third round now. But they were that confident in him that when his 40 time came in below level, and Les Snead had been following him since early in his days and at whatever it was, University of Eastern Washington. Is that what it is? Division II. Kendrick Bourne and Cooper Kupp were teammates out there, but Les Snead had been following him since then because he'd been at the Peyton Manning passing camp, and Manning was wanted to work with Cooper Kupp every day. And so Les Snead started following him, and it was oh, we're drafting this guy regardless of his measurables because he can get open. And then he runs his slow 40 time, and they're like, yes, we can get him in the third round now. and it's I kind of feel like they do a better job than most teams of identifying those. And so many of these teams waste their first round picks anyway. And realistically, right, I know superstars are going to come from the first round. You can look through Pro Bowlers year in and year out. It's almost all of them come from the first round, occasionally second round. But I do think that the Rams have done a good job there. That doesn't account for the salary that they're spending on these guys in addition to giving up the draft picks. But yeah, they're certainly not cream of the crop in the NFC West anymore. I think that'll be Seahawks and 49ers battling it out to the end, which would have been crazy to say before the season. Seahawks battling it out toward the end there.
I like these trades where you're getting a round 1 pick. There's just asymmetric upside there. The Eagles own the Saints round 1 pick, the Texans own the Browns round 1 pick, Seattle owns Denver's round 1 pick, and those are all top 10 picks. Those trades look far more lopsided with a top 10 pick. Those teams were assuming, oh, okay, you give us Deshaun Watson, you give us Russell Wilson, you give us, I don't know what the Saints were thinking. That was just such a bad trade. These are going to be low first, and they're just not. And now you have a team like the Eagles, which are undefeated, arguably the best defense in the NFC, the best offense in the NFC, and now they have 2 round 1 picks next year. They have one of which is going to be a top 10 pick. That is just such a massive. They could build a dynasty. I really just see it happening with a quarterback on a round 2 rookie contract. That's just huge. And so, Roseman's not the best drafter, but he's great at making trades. This gives him ammunition to pull off another A.J. Brown-like trade. And that was, Treylon Burks for A.J. Brown. What a bad trade.
Yeah, no, that was that's been huge for the Eagles. That's their team right there, because if you don't have A.J. Brown as that threat over the middle, then you got to account for him on every play of what he can do with the ball in his hands. He can score from anywhere in the field without a downfield throw. It's not like, we defend downfield and try to take that away. It's like anywhere on the field where he catches the ball, he's a threat to score. And so you got to account for that, which shifts your entire defensive scheme to account for that. It's crazy that the Titans let go of him. Also, the Titans are in the worst division in football, but it's also crazy that they're 5-2 and steamrolling their way toward another playoff berth, and could be a year like last year where they lock in that. I guess not with the Bills around, but they're always a threat to lock in that first round bye just because their division is so horrible. Probably less so now that there's only one first round bye available, but that Tannehill dynasty there in Tennessee is really something else in terms of at least making the playoffs and being competitive throughout the season. Any other thoughts on this last weekend? Any thoughts looking ahead to this next week, or are you ready to close this out and go have fun with the rest of your Monday? Tuesday. Today's Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday is mostly a look back day for me in terms of research, looking back at XFP and things like that. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, I spend all my time on research. So not too many look ahead stuff for me.
Cool. You have any other thoughts from XFP or anything else from this last weekend?
Yeah, I'll take a quick look. I will say, Tua doubles I think are really live every week. Like I said, 2 receivers, top 3 in yards per route run. The offense is just perfect for him as this sort of the point guard offense where you just let the speed and these elite weapons do the work. It was sad Travis Etienne wasn't on the main slate. He had the game I expected. Jacoby Myers is seriously underrated. He's scoring touchdowns this year. Elite volume, ranks top 10 in yards per route run.
I'm going to jump in on Jacoby real quickly.
Yeah,
I was going to put an under on Jacoby longest reception at 20.5 yards. I think it was. Seemed like a smash, which it ended up, he hit the under, but I looked through his game logs and it was I forget what it was, but 12 of 19 games or something like that. His longest catch has been over 20.5 yards, which again speaks to the fact that we misperceive him. He's 6'2". He's a great route runner. Commanded 12 targets this week, routinely catches a 20+ yard pass every game. I love the Jacoby Myers call, and I think that he's kind of perpetually underrated by the DFS community. He usually gets ownership, but in that range of this guy won't kill me, he'll put up some points, as opposed to recognizing that, he has legitimate upside. Obviously, the offense kind of holds him back a little bit, but I love that one.
Also his usage is a little different this year. He ranks top 25 in air yardage market share, which is just surprising for, especially given his usage last year, very low ADOT. But everything else you can check out in the XFP report, which will be out tomorrow.
Right on. Well, then I have nothing else. You got any parting words before we get out of here?
No, let's, JM, I feel like you're Andy Reid after the bye, so this is going to be a week where you take down something big. And
I like it. I got the mustache to go with the Andy Reid. No, yeah, I do. It's funny when you come off of a week off. Like I said, my confidence is high because I got things right. I'm aware that I wouldn't have gotten it all on a roster together because I didn't have A.J. Brown in my pool and I didn't have Tua. I didn't have I had a lot of Waddle as a play off of Tyreek Hill. I actually had a decent amount of Gesicki too on rosters where I was okay, if I don't play Tyreek Hill or Waddle, I want to play Gesicki because I still think they're going to score a lot of points and maybe he gets the points. So I wouldn't have had a big weekend, but just like not having that pressure of watching your rosters, and then you're just like, oh well, I would have done great this last weekend. And so yeah, I had my bye this last week. Maybe you'll get your bye this week. You can't commit to it till all your content's done, because otherwise it changes the way you produce content. But maybe by Friday night you'll be like, all right, this week's my bye week. And yeah, I'll take down everything for us this week, and then you can take down everything for us next week. With that, thanks as always for hanging out with us. We will see you on Fantasy Points. We'll see you on 1 week season. We will see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.